Welcome back, guys, to yet another World of Warcraft video on this channel. Today we are going to be talking about how to get into flipping, which is a question that is very complex and very hard to answer, but I'm going to try my absolute best in doing that today. But before we do get into it, make sure that you guys drop a like on the video. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel with all the notifications on, because it helps me out greatly. But let's get straight into it. Guys, flipping is a pretty like extensively big, I guess, part of gold making, and it's something that definitely you would normally hear, oh, you know, you can look for these items, you can do this and blah blah blah. But the number one thing that I tell people is don't think about it too hard. If you want to get into flipping, you simply just have to start and try. You have to try different things. Obviously, the most important thing with flipping is research. And secondly to that, it's experience. Because the only way that you're going to know what's good to flip on your server is either you research, you figure out what's working out greatly for others, you ask the right questions, like what kind of markets are you flipping? How much do you spend on it? Different price tables, like do you start small? Do you start with materials, transmog, toys, mounts? Like, what kind of deal is it? And if it's not that, well, then you go into experience, right? So you try out different markets that you think might be good, and then you learn, right? Some might work out, some might not. And the reality is the situation, every single person that you might see flipping or talk about flipping or do flipping, every single one has markets that do not work out. But it's better to figure out that a market doesn't work than not knowing if it works or not. And obviously, being able to be in a position like that, you need to have enough gold to do so. But that doesn't mean you need hundreds of thousands of gold or tens of millions. You just need enough to get into it. And obviously, I would always recommend, if you're new to it, start small, okay? Start with materials, maybe, like cheaper materials. And obviously, having add-ons for that purpose is a really good idea. Having TSM is a really good idea for price sources. I would also recommend using the Undermine Journal, because then you can check, obviously, the history of a certain market or a certain material or whatever it is. And it's really important to do that before you just mindlessly buy something and don't think about it. And also, you have to realize when it comes to flipping, based on the market that you invest into, and also the server, of course, it requires a certain amount of babysitting. And what I mean by that is you can't just go into, let's say, something right here is a pretty good idea. You can't just go into Veiled Maroons and say, I'm going to buy this entire market out, and I'm going to put it up to 230 gold, and then post once and leave. A market like this requires babysitting. So when you make an investment like that, you need to know, okay, I need to have time to sit here and babysit this market. That might not be the case if you buy a piece of transmog or something, because that obviously there's less competition in a market like that. But I just want you guys to understand, if you want your flips to work out greatly, then you also need to know how much time they're going to require to be able to work out in a good manner. And the other thing I would say is it's really important also to look at vendor values, because again, with something like Veiled Maroons here, these cost a lot to post. You want to think about, okay, if I decide to buy all of this, am I going to have enough wiggle room? And what do I mean by wiggle room? It's a term that I like to use as for specific two different price points. So let's say right here you can see, if we bought the entire market out up to 230 gold, well, we buy it for 135 gold, which means that from 135 gold up to 290, there's a 95 gold difference. You also have to take into account that there's an auction house cut, so you would take 230, and then you would figure out what your value. So you see there's 219 gold. So the wiggle room right here is 80 free gold. So your potential profit on each and every one of these Veiled Augment runes, if you were to sell them at 230, is 80 free gold. Now obviously with something like Augment runes, it's not bad. Like that's a lot of wiggle room, but you also have to understand you have to spend 781,000 to do this on my server, for example. And a lot of people have a lot of stock when it comes to these. And something that's specifically been happening with Veiled Augment runes on my server here is you guys can actually see that the market value is 151 gold, and this price has gone lower and lower and lower, which means a lot of people are tanking the prices trying to get sales, and there's not as much demand anymore. That is obviously not going to be the case on something like a Wednesday or a raiding night, because a lot of people will need them, but throughout the week the prices might actually just lower and lower and lower. But the wiggle room is the most important part. Do not make an investment where the wiggle room is so tiny that you will really quickly lose out on your investment. So it's something like, let's say that you had to buy 5,800 Veiled Augment runes at 200 gold. Well, then there's only a 30 gold difference, and after the auction house cut, it's only an 18 gold difference. And you have to sell a lot of these to make your gold back. Now, obviously, let's say that you bought all of these at 135 gold, and they would sell for 230, that's 218 gold, so it'd be an 80 free gold profit. How many would you have to sell before you actually make it into profit? Well, an easy way to figure that out is we have 5,758 times, it would be 218 if you sold all of them. So you can see that would be 1.2 million 500, well 1.2.5 million, so 1,255,000. That's if you were to sell all of them. So now how many would it take to get to, you know, just under 800,000? Well, then you would have to obviously minus, well, there's a couple different ways to getting around it or getting to this point. You could, for example, you could just take 218 and you could obviously divide it by 781,000. That's what we're going to do. So 218 is going to be 3,582. So you guys can see 5,758 Veiled Augment runes is how many we buy. To reach a break-even point, we would have to sell 3,582 of them, which means that we're still going to have, so we're still going to have what? 2,200 almost? 2,200? A little over 2,000 is what we're going to have left to actually start profiting on. And that's if the price does not change at all. Obviously, if the price continues to go down again really quickly, then the profit that you might make on it is not good. But obviously, I'm using Veiled Augment runes as one, example here. And that is specifically a material that is very specific depending on the market. But knowing how something like a Veiled Augment rune is going to move is very dependent on the server, which is what I'm trying to basically portray to you guys. Because in most cases, if I did this on the right day, like if I did this right before Wednesday, this might actually be a good idea, and I might in peak hours be able to sell a lot of these for over 200 gold because I know people are willing to pay that much for them, right? But either way, I just wanted to portray it as best as I could. If you guys have any questions to flipping, because I know it's a giant complex thing and it's really hard to get into it, but what you guys have to understand is you just have to start. It's simple. Look for what people buy the most, okay? So if you're looking at materials, you could both do old world expansion materials, but you could also do current world materials. If you're doing transmog, what is selling the greatest, right? It could be island expedition transmogs. They're super, super great. Or it could be some of the, well, nice women transmogs, because if I say the actual determination for it that people use here, I'll get demonetized. We don't want that. But either way, I just want you guys to understand that you have to try and get into it. There's a lot of things that can actually help you out, like different add-ons and all of this stuff, but understanding the basics of how some of this works, you have to get into it. You have to try. But either way, that is everything that I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And until the next one, see you guys.